Okay, we are off. We just left my home here in Oakhurst and we're gonna head to Mariposa today. I've got a couple of errands to run over there, taking care of our vacation rental home in Mariposa. But I thought today we would just take video of the drive. This will give you a sense of what it's like here in the mountains, just in terms of the roads. We'll drive into town. So up here on this end of what's called Road 426, we've got quite a few vacation rentals, including the one at my own house where guests are checking out today. You are also going to see some road work. Anyway, we've got a couple of houses down that road, some owned by clients or friends, and we'll pass several areas or properties where I have investors that are currently running successful vacation rentals. So here we're getting a little slice of Oakhurst life. Looks like some work replacing a power pole. So we have trees, we have PG&E, we have fires, we have stuff that ends up affecting maybe your commute or just your access around the place. But anyway, not unusual. We might also go through some road work on the way to Mariposa. Of course, they're always attempting to keep the roads in good shape. Again, we're serviced by two counties here. Madera County here in the Oakhurst side, and then Mariposa County for Mariposa. And there are crews out keeping the roads maintained. So you'll see that. Anyway, so we're just taking this nice little scenic route into town. We are at our house maybe 6 or 8 minutes from the downtown area of Oakhurst. Oakhurst is about 13,000 population in terms of full-time residents in the town limits. Of course, there's a lot of people that live outside of town, but that'll give you a sense. It's a small town. We do have shops and restaurants. We have several great local restaurants. In the mountains here, it tends not to be chain dominated. There are a lot of independent stores and restaurants to serve the locals and all of the visitors that we get every year. And this road that we're on is fairly typical in terms of terrain. Like you see, it's surrounded by oak trees, a few curves, and we're gonna now get down into more the city center shortly. So in addition to just a tour of the area, I do also want to touch on some of the permitting issues, because I think that might be a good time to just give you some insight and information. Also compare the two counties in terms of what is involved in the permitting process. And this is timely because there are some new regulations that are being considered, debated, workshopped in Madera County now for some regulations that in some ways are more similar to what Mariposa County has had all along. So from memory, I will try to give you some of the highlights. Again, this isn't going to be a deep dive. We will do a deep dive into regulations and the permitting process in a subsequent video, but today I think I'll just hit the highlights as food for thought while I'm driving. Okay, so now we're down, starting to approach the main highway in Oakhurst, starting to see some shopping, local businesses, local phone company there. Anyway, so this is, like I said, the end of Road 426, and we're going to come up to this intersection, which is Highway 41, which is the main thoroughfare through town. We would have gone right there to get to Yosemite National Park, which is about 30 minutes up the road in terms of the south gate of Yosemite. But instead, we're going to jog over to Highway 49, which is the road that takes us to Mariposa. you start to see maybe some familiar logos. We have a McDonald's in town, Rayleigh's in terms of groceries, some local places like Pete's Place there. And exciting news this year, we actually got Chipotle, which you see here on the right. You may love or hate Chipotle. As it turns out, my wife and I are on Tim Ferriss's slow carb diet, and Chipotle is one of those places we can go out and stay on plan. So we are pretty happy that came to town. So now we're on Highway 49, which, like I said, is the highway that will take us to Mariposa. You might be able to see up there on the sign, Mariposa is 26 miles from here. And then we're going to pass through a couple of other communities on the way, which I'll point out. Okay, so heading up the hill here out of town, we're also going to pass Southgate Brewing Company on the left there. That is one of our favorite restaurants in town. They've got craft beers and lots of great food, and it's just for casual dining, a great place to go, highly recommended. And we will soon pass the local Kaiser. That's where we go for our doctor's visits. And we also have Ace Hardware, which is a very well-stocked, actually before we get to Ace, we got Tractor Supply, which is also fairly new in the last couple of years. So between Ace and Tractor Supply and some of the other local shops, you definitely can get supplied for your vacation rental, anything you might need in terms of supplies or small utilities, weed eaters and all the such. But anyway, that'll give you an idea. So now we're again on the outskirts of town. As you can see, civilization quickly fell away. We are going to be going through some residential areas and a few sites to see. Soon we'll be at Goldside. I'll point that out when we go by, because you may see some listings in Goldside pop up in your feed. But we've got this little stretch here, and you can see bucolic country living. Most of the homes here are on some land, either a large lot or maybe some acreage. I live on about 2.5 acres where I'm at. So we get into Mariposa. A lot of Mariposa County is minimum 5-acre parcels, so there's lots and lots of homes on 5 acres. But you can also find homes. I have a listing now on 34 acres, and I've also got a land listing of 51 acres. So if you want large acreage, it does exist. There's right there on Harmony Lane, up that road, there's quite a few successful vacation rentals. And again, there's pockets, right? So part of what I'm going to try to give you today is a sense for maybe some of the pluses and minuses of some of these areas. We're not going to necessarily drive into anything and really see it in detail, but I'll point it out and you'll have a sense of where does it sit between Oakhurst and Mariposa, which are the two major metropolitan areas in this region. That's a bit of a joke, obviously, since they're both small towns. But okay, down on this slope here, we've got Goldside, which is a planned community. And at this point, it does allow vacation rentals. There are a handful in there. They do have an HOA. They do manage things and police things to keep the neighborhood in good shape. They have a little 9-hole golf course. Anyway, it's not a bad community, and depending on the specific property, there's potential there. And as we're driving, you'll also see some real estate signs. A lot of my local friends and local realtors have got listings scattered about. And we are now starting to hit the outskirts of Ahwahnee. Ahwahnee is the next community over from Oakhurst. And again, not a large community, gas station, restaurant, a little mini mart. But there is a regional park there that's a nice place to go hiking when you don't want to make the trek into Yosemite necessarily. But what we've got here to the left is the one golf course in town. It's a 9-hole course, but it's a full-length course, and it's called River Creek, and it's actually quite good. I like playing that course, and I have hosted friends there that have played in courses all over the world. It holds its own. Like I said, it's not a golf destination, but if you've got somebody in town that wants to go golfing, you can recommend it, and I think they'll have a nice round there. Now we're passing road 621. This is in Ahwahnee, and I have several friends and clients that have vacation rentals up that road. Again, it's a nice private country road with some beautiful property, some views, and they've done quite well there. Again, that's maybe one of the first significant community areas within Ahwahnee that would lend itself to vacation rental. I don't think there's no homeowners association. It's just a kind of a cluster of country homes. And then this is the hitching post, which is quite a good place for a meal in Ahwahnee. And then again, off this road here, 628, you've got quite a few nice homes. So again, just giving you an idea of the countryside. Hope this isn't too boring. I do want to get back, while we're in Madera County, we'll just touch on the regulatory environment. So Madera County has been, some would call it the Wild West. It's been pretty casual. If you wanted to do a short-term rental and list your home on Airbnb or Vrbo, you could do that pretty simply. The process was simply, you get a business license, and then on your business license you tell them that your business is vacation rental, and then you pay your TOT taxes or file for the taxes, because in actuality Airbnb collects and pays the taxes on your behalf. Pretty straightforward and quite simple and inexpensive. And by the way, that is the Ahwahnee Regional Park, nice hiking trail, and just wanted to point that out. Okay, so back to Madera County regulations. And again, when I say Madera County, that covers Oakhurst, Ahwahnee, Bass Lake, Coarsegold, pretty much that whole area is controlled by Madera County, which the county seat is down in the valley. But straightforward as a business license. Then, and that business license had to be renewed every year. Maybe it's $50 a year, not a big deal. They did add a questionnaire that basically, and I'm not quite sure exactly when they did that. They did not have that in place when we started 9 years ago, but somewhere along the line, if you choose vacation rental as your business, then you're going to fill out some additional information, but just square footage and what is it that you're going to be reporting on. So I think, frankly, number one priority of the county is to understand where all these businesses are and make sure that they are collecting taxes or accounting for the taxes that have been collected by a third party. So that's how it's been going for a while. Very straightforward. I have many clients in Madera County that have purchased homes and have been successful on Airbnb. Now, as you can imagine, there are some bad actors, right? There are people that don't particularly manage their guests closely. Maybe the issue is just it's a giant house and it ends up being 3 groups and 25 people, and they just can't hardly help themselves from being a bit of a nuisance. So that happens. And the county supervisors have gotten complaints. There's also concerns about fire safety. So maybe the flatlanders, as some people up here call them, come up, rent an Airbnb. They have a bonfire, campfire, it gets out of control. They don't know the rules in terms of burn days, etc. And so there's concern about fire safety. And then just noise, they're playing loud music, they're shooting off guns, whatever it is. Parking, noise, trash. We have bears up here. Most every vacation rental or short-term rental owner that I work with, I encourage them to get a bear-proof dumpster. The local sanitation company will rent you one, and then they'll pick it up every time it's full, and there is some expense, but it's not prohibitive, and it may not be more or significantly more than trash pickup in the city. But that trash is now safely locked away and the bears can't get to it, and that's a good precaution. It's just pretty much necessary to operate a vacation rental. But some owners aren't informed or savvy or willing to make the expense, and then bears get into their trash and drag it all over, or the guests just aren't aware and maybe they leave it outside or whatever. So anyway, I think that the initial emphasis to formalize the regulations and a permitting process was really all about just neighbor impact, community impact, making sure that short-term rentals are good neighbors to the rest of the community. So I think that's the emphasis and the impetus to kick that off. I think that another objective was really to just document and formalize some things that were considered policy all along, but either were not well communicated, publicized, uniformly enforced. So there was some confusion. So I think as we've gone through a review of the documents with some representatives from the county, what we're hearing is on a lot of the points, oh yeah, that's the way it's always been. We just wanted to document it in these new regulations. That's where I would say maybe my number one bone of contention with these proposed regulations is. And again, this is a regulation that they're presenting as something that's been clearly on the laws and would have been enforced all along. And that is this idea that you will only be able to get one vacation rental permit per parcel in Madera County, and that is again being presented as being the law all along. Now, I won't name names, but I personally know of many short-term rentals in Madera County, in Oakhurst, that are two homes on one lot, and they're rented separately as two different listings on the hosting platforms. The taxes are being collected and reported, but either there's some confusion, the permit is for the address, and there are multiple homes on that address, and maybe it's not obvious to the county, or they're looking the other way. I don't know exactly what the issue is, but it has not affected the operators that I know up to this point. But as this becomes codified and more universally, and I assume equitably enforced, we might see this as an issue. And I am concerned for some of the individuals that may or may not be my clients that may have purchased property specifically for this use case and now are discovering that there may be a regulatory issue. So we're going to get to the bottom of that. Not quite sure how that's going to pan out, but yeah, so we've got to address that issue. And ironically, most of the proposed regulations in Madera County are less strict than Mariposa County, but in this case, this very significant case or point, it's more strict, because in Mariposa County, you may, on some lots, have up to 5 homes, 2 residences, 2 ADUs, 1 junior ADU, but they will only grant you 2 vacation rental permits. But it is 2, not 1, like Madera County is now proposing. Important regulatory issue to be resolved. Now, take a little quick detour for my conversation about regulations, and we are passing Chowchilla Mountain Road, and up Chowchilla Mountain Road is Ponderosa Basin. So as you notice, we've been driving for a while since Oakhurst. We are now in Mariposa County, and we're going to drive about the same distance to Mariposa. So Ponderosa Basin is located on Highway 49, roughly halfway between Oakhurst and Mariposa. And you might ask yourself, how could a vacation rental do well there? It's not very close to the park on either direction. So I think a couple of things. Number one, it is a beautiful area. Ponderosa Basin is a very wooded, kind of magical place in the winter, certainly, with the tall pine trees, very hilly terrain, lots of views. So it does well. And by the way, just backing up, we just passed Triangle Road. That is the road that cuts the corner between Highway 49 and Highway 140 to go in the Highway 140 Yosemite entrance. Okay, so just, again, try to call these things out as we go, so you got to get a sense of it. Ponderosa Basin, it's a good spot. Look at the competitive rentals. There are lots and lots of high-performing rentals in that area. I've got a client right now in contract in Ponderosa Basin. I expect them to do quite well. Again, I think maybe it's become a little bit of a destination. It's certainly within the realm of areas that visitors to Yosemite are considering. And being halfway in between Highway 41 and Highway 140. Oh my gosh, we just passed Mariposa Coffee Roasting Company. Wow, it's difficult trying to cover multiple streams at the same time. I didn't want this to just be a tour video calling out sites, but I will try to interrupt my dialogue to do that. Anyway, now we're all over the map. So we'll leave Ponderosa Basin. We'll come back to STR Regulations, which is, say, the main topic of this video. I think that in Madera County, still TBD, lots of open issues. They're also talking about capping bedrooms at 5 and occupancy at 10 adults, 2 for each bedroom, and 6 additional children. We'll see. There's going to be debate, there's going to be workshops, there's going to be community feedback, and we expect the vote to be sometime in August. And I'll try to keep you up. So if there are any new developments, we'll maybe jump on with a short video. But I wanted to give you, again, just more of the high-level overview. So Madera, bottom line, was super easy, getting a little more difficult. We don't know how difficult. We'll know more in August. So let's pivot to Mariposa County. So as you can imagine, Madera County being a little bit looser has been an attractive destination or location for short-term rental investors. Mariposa County has always been, let's say, just on the stricter side. Okay, so number one, expense. It costs roughly $1,500 to get a vacation rental permit in Mariposa County. Why? They're going to either pay for or schedule 4 inspections: building, planning, fire, environmental services. What does that really mean? Number one, they've got to make sure that there's no planning violations on your property, there's no unpermitted buildings, there's no construction that's not to code, you're fire safe, you have evacuation maps, you have signage on the front of your property telling them who to call if there's an issue, your septic system is adequate to handle all the people at your listing. So it's expensive, relatively, $1,500. That's a one-time expense. That is not a recurring expense. But there's also time involved. So I would say consider 2 months on average what it's going to take you from the time you pay your money, start the process, and get your permit, assuming there's no major issues that have to be resolved. there's a wait list and it's going to take time. Now, how can you tighten that time frame? They do have an affidavit that the seller can sign that will give you the option to start your application early while your property is still in escrow. That is an expense that is maybe at risk. Let's say you're in escrow, you start your application, and then an issue comes up and your contract falls out, you don't get that money back. That is a risk you're taking, but it's a way to shorten the time frame to get your license. Now, still highly recommended, because that's potentially lost revenue if you could get your license a month earlier than you could without starting the process early. So that's one. What else? There's just some basic restrictions at the high level. Mariposa vacation rentals are limited to 3 bedrooms and 10 guests. What does that mean? I've got a 5-bedroom home, I've got a 4-bedroom home. Again, there's bedrooms and there's guests, and again, you're going to have a 3-bedroom listing on Airbnb, then you're going to show the potential guests where they'll sleep, and you're going to, maybe they're sleeping in an office or in a den or I don't know, figure it out. But it's got to be 3 bedrooms max, 10 people max. In order for it to support 10 people, you have to have the septic capacity to handle 10 people. And what I've noticed, we had about 2 to 3 years ago a bit of a controversy in Mariposa County about short-term rentals and concern about the effect on local housing. And again, lots of hearings and a very extensive study. And I think what they determined was that it really wasn't the short-term rentals that were affecting the long-term housing. They put in place some other regulations, opening up some permitting process for new builds and trying to look at zoning and some other things. So they're going to try to solve that the other way. But during that controversy or debate, there were some very serious considerations for putting a moratorium or a cap or a freeze or a hold on short-term rental applications or permits in Mariposa County. They ultimately decided not to do that, but I think that part and parcel with that decision was, okay, we're just going to more strictly enforce the laws that are on the books. So what I've noticed is maybe a little stricter, a little tightening up of the enforcement of the regulations, in particular while you're going through the permitting process. So I had a client, they bought a property that had been a licensed short-term rental in Mariposa County for 3 years, no problems. It was a 3-bedroom home, able to accommodate, I think 6 to 8 guests. Well, the county inspected their property to get their new permit, which is not transferable from the old owner. You're basically starting from scratch, and they started from scratch with perhaps a little stricter criteria, and they ended up having to invest some money, let's just say not an insignificant amount of money, in upgrading their septic system to handle the number of guests that the home could accommodate. So just again, something to pay attention to in Mariposa County. Now, the other thing that you need, and it doesn't affect you typically if you're out in the country, but there has to be a 10-foot by 20-foot off-street parking spot for each bedroom in your listing or on your permit. We're going to roll up to my home on 9th Street, which is downtown Mariposa, pretty quickly, and you'll see I've got a garage and a driveway, so I've got those 3 spots to accommodate and to meet the requirement. But it's possible that you might be looking at a property in town and there really isn't accommodation for a parking spot for each bedroom, and even if there's plenty of street parking, that doesn't count. So just, again, another regulation to pay attention to. And going back to some of the other, I don't know, the ins and outs of the permitting process, You do need a site plan, so you basically have to show the property lines, where all the buildings are, and dimensions, and then identify where the parking spots are. Again, they want to make sure that your property complies to the requirements at a high level. And we talked a little bit about signage. You're allowed to put up a sign on your property promoting your listing, your property name or whatever, but you're required to put a sign at the front door, easily visible, that has the contact information of whoever's responsible. So if it's your manager or if it's you that's the owner, the idea is if there's a problem, a neighbor should be able to walk up, see that sign, call the responsible person, and have it dealt with. So that's got to be right at the front door. And then inside the property, you're going to have a sign over the exit that basically says how many guests can be accommodated. And again, if they tell you your septic system can accommodate 6 guests, then that's what's got to be on that sign. Doesn't matter how many beds or what you have. A, it can't be more than 10, and B, it can't be more than what the septic system can accommodate. Now, fortunately, my property in Mariposa is on city sewer, so I'm good. Then you have to have a floor plan that shows the evacuation route from each sleeping area. And that's got to be posted on the wall. It's got to identify where they're at and where they need to go to get out. And then you need to have fire extinguisher in the home. So basically in the kitchen, you've got to have a fire extinguisher. And then if you have a barbecue, you've got to have a fire extinguisher by the barbecue. So I think that about covers most of the high level sort of regulations that they enforce in Mariposa. But again, you really do have to be careful. They do have people checking if you've got a violation. You've got a listing that says you can host 14 people in Mariposa County. They're probably going to find it and create a problem for you or shut you down. Okay, now we are in downtown Mariposa. So we've got art galleries, restaurants, shops. It's quaint, right? And here's one of our favorite restaurants, Savory's. Here's Tourist Homes, which is a little boutique hotel run as an Airbnb by my former real estate broker, Courtney Twiss, and her real estate company. We're still proudly part of EXP together. She is my sponsor, but now I'm off doing my own thing with Sharp Mountain Homes. But we have a very good working relationship, love her to death. So this is, you can see the other end of town. I'm going to drive through town so you can see the whole thing. Yeah, it's quaint. I was in the middle of my regulations rant, so I didn't call everything out. But people love staying in and around Mariposa. And if you're in Mariposa County outside of town, then people are going to want to know, how long does it take me to get to town? Get to all those cool restaurants. So Mexican restaurant on the left, 1850 on the right, which is Southgate in a way, but in Mariposa. Happy Diner, which is amazing. And anyway, cool town, small town. Starbucks, actually the very first Starbucks. What you won't see in Mariposa is a lot of chains. So even more than Oakhurst, they're all pretty much local businesses. Starbucks being an exception that just took over a space this year. But we've got the visitor center here, and I'm gonna wrap around here and drive to my house, my short-term rental. Incidentally, one of the things that was really nice about Mariposa is during COVID, there were, for many months, no cases reported in Mariposa County, and they basically didn't shut down. So you could go to restaurants, and my wife and I actually stayed in our own house a lot during that period of time, just to enjoy the freedom and the convenience of not being shut down by COVID stuff, which now seems maybe almost like a distant memory. So we just went through town. We're looping back to 9th Street where my home is. We're on Jones right now. We're gonna drive by the county buildings. So this complex over on the right is where the county buildings are. building planning and all the departments. And we are also going to pass the Mariposa County Courthouse, and this may be interesting to you. In fact, we'll just loop around so you can see the front. This is the longest continually operating courthouse west of the Mississippi River. It's right here in Mariposa. Yeah, cool. So yeah, Mariposa is very quaint. We like it a lot. I have family that's lived here for almost forever, and there you can see the sign since 1854. Very cool. And they have events there. It's a center of the community in many ways. All right, we are almost to my house, which will be the end of the video and the end of the tour. And we'll also put a cap on this in terms of, again, from one house to the next. And I have no idea how this video is going to turn out. And like I said, I hope it's interesting to you. Rambling, covered a bunch of topics, but just coming back to the permitting issues in Mariposa County. I've got some experience, some scars, if you will. This is our home. It's a 3-bedroom, 3-bath home. We actually have it listed as a 2-bedroom also. Why? Because not every group needs 3 bedrooms, and we wanted to make sure that we were addressing the market that's just maybe 2 couples or a small family, and that we're capturing that business as well. And we offer a slightly lower price and a slightly lower cleaning fee, but it books as a 2-bedroom about half the time. And I can't imagine that we would generate as much revenue if we listed it as 3-bedroom only. Now, it's either or. It's honor system. We just say, did you rent the 2-bedroom or the 3-bedroom? And if you rented the 2-bedroom, don't use the 3rd bedroom. So it's worked out well. We've gotten great reviews on both listings. People seem to love the house. This is not a tour of the house. This was, like I say, a tour of the highway between Oakhurst and Mariposa and everything in between, with a discussion on regulations as we went. So I'm just trying to think in terms of STR regulations. Just one last thing, I'll end with this. Mariposa, you file once a month. And again, you identify if the revenue that you generated was Airbnb, and if it was 100% Airbnb, you don't actually pay taxes, but you have to file taxes once a month. In Madera County, it's once a quarter. Other than that, like I said, it's pretty straightforward. I think, just to wrap this up, the thing to keep in mind is make sure you're working with somebody that knows the regulations, that knows the implications of the regulations, and what that could mean in terms of the return on investment of the home that you buy in our area.